I think that we could start. Please use your headphones because I will speak in my mother language, in Greek. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here this morning. It is quite early for a press conference. My name is Dimitris Papadimoulis. I'm the Vice President of the European Parliament, and I head GUE MEPs, and I'm also a member of the steering committee, together with the other colleagues here, the steering committee of a new alliance called the Progressive Caucus. What is the Progressive Caucus? It is an initiative, a forum based on dialogue and common action, joint action, that brings together MEPs from three political groups. The group of the United Left, I'm a member of GUE NGL, and so is my political party. It also brings together the Socialists and the Greens. We are MEPs who, despite the fact that we come from different political families, share common concerns. And that is why we decided to set up this Progressive Caucus in order to achieve two things. First of all, we want to launch a dialogue on extremely urgent matters. In other words, where is Europe heading to? What do European citizens want from European policies? And also because we want to counter populism and the far right, that it is taking advantage, it is exploiting the crisis to go back to a very dangerous past. So we have common worries and shared concerns, but we also want to organize joint actions. And an example of what we want to do is what we've organized today. We've brought together experts and distinguished guests in order to talk about CETA and TTIP, because we believe that both these agreements harbor lots of dangers for all citizens, especially the more vulnerable ones. We've already informed the leaders of the political groups that we belong to that we're not trying to set up a new political group. We just want to have a discussion and to have joint actions that bring together the progressive forces of the European Parliament. I think that this is very urgent, and I think it's going to be very useful for everyone. Before I give the floor to everyone, because I do want to be brief, I'd like to say that up to now, when it comes to these internal discussion meetings, we've had the participation of at least 100 MEPs from the three different political groups. And I think that this clearly illustrates that our initiative reflects a real need. We want your contribution. For example, we want you to attend our meeting this afternoon, but we will also keep you informed on future initiatives. I'd like to give the floor to Guillaume Balas.
Yes, I'm speaking in French. Je suis Guillaume Balas.
I'm Guillaume Balas. I'm a French socialist member from the Paris region, if you can picture that, in France. I'll be brief. I'll just add 2 points to what my colleague said. The first point is that this discussion between progressive members implies that each one of us can bring in different elements to the discussion. For some, it could be just a simple discussion or a common basis. For others, including myself, there is a broader idea that the current political situation in Europe requires political reshuffling, where the left-wing parties or groups need to talk to each other to fully prepare that moment. It's quite normal for some of us to be more cautious about that. objective, but the Progressive Caucus at the moment enables us to fulfil that requirement here in the European Parliament, and for others it's a more strategic platform for the left wing over the coming years in the European Parliament. Now, the CETA issue complies with those two issues because we see a globalization phase coming to an end, which was the utopian idea of free economic trade and progressive installation of a world market without control. Now we're saying the disastrous environmental consequences of that, social consequences as well with ever greater gaps, and also consequences in terms of democracy, where everywhere it's becoming more and more obvious that people want to regain control of their own destiny. That's the case with TTIP, but in the case of the Canada agreement, CETA, all of this seems to have been swept under the carpet. Now, just look at the energy consequences and the environmental consequences of CETA with energy trade based on a situation where no environmental standards are respected, which means greater climate dangers and also dangers elsewhere. And when they are called upon to study this fully before adopting it, that's not the case because the people are not being consulted. So we're seeing at the moment that CETA is allowing progressive members to get together and to try to understand what's happening and, if possible, fight against it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ballas. Mrs. Eva Joly from the Greens.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. Now, creating the Progressive Caucus is something that we had to do. It was a kind of third way to stand up to the big coalition that there is in this House, where there was no real platform for discussion of important matters to us, such as CETA. We also see that with the creation of our committees of inquiry. You can see there how altogether we've managed to create this political platform for an alternative way. And when we worked on Tax 1 and 2, we took part in the creation of that alternative space in order to demonstrate that there is a space for the people in order to make progress with the different union policy areas. So I'm delighted to be here this morning and to present our modest project to the press. I invite you to come along this evening to hear our analyses of the treaty with Canada that may be imposed upon us, perhaps even without consulting the Parliament. So it's very important to carry out that analysis for the people of Europe so that everyone can fully understand the effects of the treaty on the European people, and in particular for French farmers, for example. All of this has been hushed away, so it's very important for the Progressive Caucus to meet and to fully expose all the consequences. You know that CETA may enter into force without any impact assessment having been carried out, although it's a major treaty which comes before TTIP and which is a Trojan horse. If we have a treaty with the Americans, all of the American companies have branches in Canada, so it's of utmost importance. I invite you all to come along later on.
Member of the GUE NGL of the European left.
Evaristo. Good morning to everybody. My name is Fabio De Masi, my dear friend Eva. I'm the Vice President of the Panama Papers Inquiry Committee, but I'm speaking here certainly in my private capacity. The summer break is over, and we think it's high time for change. And for some change, I will change to German now as well, so the translator is not unemployed. Der progressive Caucus.
The Progressive Caucus is an initiative where we have different views. Can you hear English interpretation? English on channel 2? German into English, yes, on channel 2. Channel 2, okay? Yes, we have different political traditions, different views of European integration, because we agree on one thing, and that is that this race towards the lowest wages and social standards is threatening democracy, because we believe that the major challenges of our time, the many crises that we have in Europe at the moment, the refugee crisis, the euro crisis, Brexit and others, cannot be overcome if this policy continues. In the European Parliament, we're living under the banner of a major coalition, and we think that the European Parliament cannot fulfill its historic duties if we do not stand up and mobilise against this policy. That's the reason why we've picked up on the CETA agreement. I'm delighted that the German Social Democrats are starting their first critical discussion of CETA, and we want to send a message out saying that within our political group there are major misgivings and concerns about this agreement, and the same goes for the lion's share of the population. Many people, many foundations, unions, churches, small businesses, they're all acting and speaking out against this agreement. We believe that President Hollande or other heads of state and government are not going to say that CETA is dead, but we think that CETA is the smaller sibling of TTIP with the same dangers. The Association of Judges in Germany has spoken out against the agreement because of the provisions contained there within. So this message we're sending out is that the Parliament should not necessarily rubber stamp the agreement. There are other controversial topics that we often discuss with members, as our colleague has said, sometimes 50 of us, sometimes 100 of us. We discuss all the controversies in an atmosphere of trust, because there's far too little time in this Parliament allocated to fundamental policy debates. There's going to be a British Labour Congress that I'm going to take part in, because we want to strengthen our ties. We may see Jeremy Corbyn visiting the European Parliament. I won't reveal anything today, but we're looking forward to your participation. Of course, I'm available for any questions.
And now we have limited time. Oh, sorry. And Ernest Urtasun from the Greens. Sorry, Ernest.
No problem, Dimitris. I will also switch to English, to Spanish. So we have all many different languages here present today. Bueno, buenos días.
Good morning. I'll be brief. I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts with you. First of all, we're very pleased to be here. We've been working on this new forum for a while, and we're launching it with this press conference, but we'll have this meeting this evening. But we feel there is a kind of dual or double vacuum, and this struck me when I came to the Parliament, because I'm a new MEP, and that is that there is no real dialogue framework for progressive MEPs. we have similar opinions on many fronts, but there is no specific structure or framework for that dialogue, and I think that we filled that void by setting up the Progressive Caucus, and I think it's extremely important to try and pinpoint what common ground there is and what we can work on. And I think that CETA is an example. We're all very critical of CETA. This is something that brings us all together. And I think that this is an example of what the Progressive Caucus should focus on. But we're trying to fill a second void. And I think that this is even more significant. I think that citizens feel that they cannot hear clear left-wing voices on the European project, where Europe is heading to. People feel that the left is rudderless at the moment, at a very difficult moment where there are so many problems on the horizon. I think that we can fill this void as well, and this forum helps people realize that the left wing is doing something about this and that there are the right for, and this will help the overall European project. So this is a very important moment for us, and I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernest. And now we have a limited time for questions and answers. Short questions, short answers. Please.
Oui, bonjour, Pascal.
Good morning, Pascal Vedo from France Télévisions. I have a question about CETA for Ms. Joly and Mr. Ballas. The treaty allows imports of Canadian beef, 65,000 tonnes. Now, you said there's a lack of transparency for the European people. I'm thinking about the National Bovine Federation, which is in movement in French campaigns at the moment. They feel that they've been short-circuited. Do you share their fears about the dangers for, say, the Charolais breed in France or other breeds, or animal health issues? Is there a danger there for France, because we hear that Canadian beef may be full of hormones? Thank you.
Je partage tout à fait les soucis.
Yes, I share the concerns of the bovine farmers in France. 60,000 tonnes of even high quality meat will perturb the market. This was negotiated when we were 28. More than 40% of Canadian exports went to England. So these quantities are excessive if they're for 27 member states. So all of that needs to be re-looked at. Now, the declared objective of this agreement is to bring down customs barriers that barely exist, but in particular the health obstacles. There is indeed a concern for public health, and also for the disappearance of certain breeds. So there are many very serious problems that haven't been discussed, and our objective is precisely that, to open the debate and invite the European people to become aware of these issues. The Parliament has to vote yes or no to the treaty. If we want it to be no, we need the support of public opinion. So we're trying to mobilise public opinion on these very important issues that are matters of concern to them, that are all being hushed away. Everything is being presented as if this agreement were all fine because the Canadians are all very nice people.
Please.
Joanna Sapinska, EU-Trade Insights. Good morning. My question is, what is the aim of your campaign exactly? What do you want to achieve? Do you want the CETA agreement to be renegotiated, or do you want it to be killed right now before being signed? And the second question, what do you have any other targets? Are you thinking about the EU agreement with Vietnam, which is gonna reach the same stage soon, or EU-Singapore agreement as well? Those agreements are, in fact, similar to the CETA agreement. And finally, a more general question about your platform. You call yourself Progressive Caucus, and at the same time, you want, as I understood, you are very much against the CETA agreement, which is regarded as one of the most progressive agreements, free trade agreements. So my question is, what is behind this? Thank you.
Well, very shortly, I can only speak for myself, but I think that most of my colleagues would agree that we cannot ratify CETA as it stands, and hence we're interested certainly in preventing it. This holds also for the preliminary application, so a lot of national member states are exposed to grave risks when it comes, for example, to investor arbitration without the national parliaments even having had a say in those agreements. I would tend to disagree on the progressive content of CETA with you, but you're certainly invited to elaborate with us on that further this afternoon. We think that this logic certainly also applies to other trade agreements. We are not a trade lobbying group or anything, so we will focus with the most relevant European issues here, also migration crisis, social dumping, euro crisis, the need for investment programs. But so far, and you can go back to the history of European integration, when the European internal market was created, the Cecchini report promised growth and jobs. This did not materialize. We have ample evidence of this kind of neoliberal market-based integration, and we think this is the source between a fundamental crisis of democracy. We had the German elections right now in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, where AfD became the second strongest force, and we have to respond to that.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Daniel Brössler, Süddeutsche Zeitung. Some of you mentioned the sort of grand coalition that is in Parliament. Is it actually your aim to attack this grand coalition and to bring this grand coalition to an end? And I might have missed that because I came late. Did you say something about how many members you have, and is there a list of members of this caucus? Thank you. Especially the question if there is a member of SPD, of the German Social Democrats. Thank you.
First of all, on beef, because that was mentioned before, there's nothing that I'd like to add. It's absurd to have beef traded internationally when we can produce it here for environmental reasons as linked to climate change. So that wipes out the progressive aspect of this agreement, madam. In what way is it progressive? Who said it was progressive? That's a question to you. Apart from the ones who have an interest in this, it's important to see who says what and why. And then a broader point. Another overarching aim of the Progressive Caucus is to re-examine the concept of free trade in general. I'm not saying that we're against international cooperation and that we want protectionism. What I mean is that we want to make sure that free trade meet ecological, environmental and social standards that are real and proper standards, and that's what we're contesting at the moment. And then, sir, you asked a question on the dynamic of the Progressive Caucus. Yes, we have members from the SPD who regularly attend members. I don't think they're members of the steering group, and they're not here today, but they do regularly attend our meeting, and they share our ambitions. Now, on the Grand Coalition, we don't want to introduce a completely new strategy in the European Parliament and make it difficult for groups, but we want to show that the left exists and that there is no reason for the socialists to always go for discussions first with the right before also looking toward left-wing partners. Thank you.
Philip Blenkinsop of Reuters. I'm aware of your criticisms of CETA, such as investment protection, for example, environmental standards. I just wondered, is your complaint about the form in which CETA is, or are you more generally against the idea of free trade deals in general? And if there were free trade deals, how would they look according to your vision?
Well, I think it's not a general discussion on free trade. The concerns are very concrete. I think, well, of course, we'll have the chance this afternoon to go more into details, because one of the aims of the session this afternoon is to actually to do a collective reading and go through the concrete details. But of course, we have commonly identified some issues that are of common concern. And the investment settlement disputes mechanism, of course, as everybody is aware, is something that is of concern of all of us. That is very clear. And not only this, we are really aware, as Guillaume was saying, about the impacts on agriculture and on other issues. So what I would say is that we are not doing, and we will not do this afternoon, just a general talk show about free trade, but we'll go very much into details about what the text does. And here, when we go into details, of course, it's very well known that we have common concerns about what's in the text.
Erik Bonse, Tageszeitung Taz, Germany. Just one question on the far right. As we see, there are gains a little bit anywhere now in Europe, in the whole of Europe. But the far right claims to be against CETA and TTIP as well. Is it a problem for you, and how is your standing on this?
No, well, it's certainly not a problem that the far right claims something, because we are actually doing something about it, and the far right is making claims. However, I think that it's not enough to complain about the rise of the far right in our member states, but we must also very thoroughly analyze where it comes from. And we think that the failed economic policies that are enshrined even in agreements like CETA or in the developments of the internal market of the European Union have contributed to it. So if you look, for example, even at the Brexit vote, certainly there was racism and other areas involved, but you could also see that people had very specific fears, for example, about social dumping, wage dumping and so on. And we think that the European Union could address these concerns, for example, by protecting collective wage agreements and so on, which it is actually not doing. And hence we think that the best struggle against the far right is to break with the failed policies that we have witnessed in the last years in the European Union. And if the far right claims to be against TTIP or CETA, I've seen many members of the far right in the resolutions actually siding with the Grand Coalition when it came to TTIP. Think about the beginning of AfD and Ben Lucke and their voting behavior. So they don't stand the reality test here.
Allow me to add to what Fabio said. The aims and agenda of the Progressive Caucus is completely the opposite to the far right. We want growth, we want a strong welfare state, we want stronger cohesion policies, a European solution to the refugee problem, and we have to make sure that we factor in climate change. We want more democracy. We don't want an atmosphere of racism and xenophobia. And on a daily basis, we're finding that the rhetoric of the far right refers to so-called social objectives, but their agenda is about going back to the past. We want to open doors to the future. Our objective is not to destroy other alliances, but to make Europe more appealing to its citizens. We want to make it more social oriented, more democratic, because the current situation is what citizens don't like, and this is what is playing into the hands of the far right. So through dialogue and hard work, we're trying to find a third way to the current crisis and to this trend of going back to the very harsh past that the far right wants to go back to. Thank you. Microphone, please.
I think that our time is finished, and we are inviting you in our event in 6:30. And thanks also to the translators, because we have also 5 minutes more than the scheduled slot. Thank you very much.